Hey, welcome to Plant Yourself. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Two quick announcements before we get to today's show. If you're interested in becoming a health coach, I'm offering another run due to popular demand for people who can't make 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights, Eastern Time. So we're doing another run of the program, which will meet, the practicums will meet at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays, Eastern Time, U.S., which means if you're in Europe or Africa, that might be good for you. Also, if you're in the U.S. and evenings aren't good and you have free time in the mornings, either 7 a.m. Pacific time or 10 to 11:30 Eastern, then you can participate. If you want to find out more about becoming a wicked effective health coach, you can go to wellstartcoach.com. Second thing is, if you're not aware of it, Josh Lajani and I have a book that is free on Amazon Kindle. It's called Sick to Fit. And if you just go to Amazon and search for Sick to Fit, you'll be able to download it for free and read it on any Kindle-enabled device, even a phone, smartphone, tablet, computer, whatever. All right, let's get to today's episode. This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com and wellstarthealth.com. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an empathic and encouraging life. Today's guest, Sanyin Siang, is kind of a big deal. She's the CEO coach and author. She is the executive director of the Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics, Cole, at Duke University. She's also one of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 proteges that he's sharing all his coaching knowledge with. Marshall Goldsmith is widely acknowledged as the most senior and experienced executive coach in the world. And I met Sanyin through another one of the Goldsmith 100, my friend Peter Bregman, who had Sanyin on his podcast. And I listened to it and I was just captivated by her spirit, by her wisdom, and by the usefulness of the information she imparts on launching. So today's conversation is about Sanyin's book, The Launch Book, Motivational Stories to Launch Your Idea, Business, or Next Career. And I have two audiences in mind for this conversation. One was myself and people like me who are involved in, business startups, big projects, things where we need to get customers on board. We need to take leaps of faith, take some risks, face failure and rejection, and keep our own heads and our own spirits, and hopefully succeed and bring something of value into the world. The second audience was people like me as well, who are trying to birth new personal habits, trying to embody new potentialities, just trying to make it through life and become a better, more authentic version of myself as I go along. So it doesn't have to be a big startup or a giant project or a new art gallery. It could simply be one of us launching the next version of ourselves. Sanyin and I conducted this conversation in person in her office, and there's quite a bit of hubbub and noise going on around us in the background. So please don't let that get in the way of enjoying this conversation. Before we begin, one quick announcement. Coach training starts quite soon. Actually, we're having our first call, a getting to know you call this evening, but we're vamping for a couple of weeks just because I misjudged how long it would take to go through everyone's applications and to schedule the enrollment interviews. So if you still would like to do it, there's still a week or so to go. Just head to wellstartcoach.com, read about it. And if you're interested, click the enrollment interview button at the very bottom, and then we will schedule that enrollment interview and see on both sides if it's a good fit. So I look forward to you listening to this interview and letting me know what you think. It's a little bit off the beaten track for the Plant Yourself podcast, but I think it's got some real gems for me and for everyone. So without further ado, Sanyin Siang, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here, Howard.
Yeah, I feel like we've been chatting for a while already. I feel like I want to catch everybody up on all the things we talked about. But we're here because you have a book called The Launch Book, and I heard about it through our mutual friend Peter Bregman.
Oh, Peter's awesome.
Yep, who had you on his podcast. And what I love about Peter's podcast most is that his conversations are short, and so there's always something more for me to ask. I feel like if he had an hour, that I wouldn't dare to follow up because he's so insightful and the conversations are so great. But he cuts it short, so he always leaves people wanting more, and so I'm often sort of trawling after him. Picking on his most fascinating guests.
Well, and your podcasts have been so wildly successful. Before this, we hit the record button. You're just sharing with me that you get recognized just walking along the trail because people recognize your voice. So congratulations on the traction that your podcast has garnered, because that says something about the value and the insights that you're bringing to the rest of the world, Howard.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I love the medium. Just the technology that's available now to be able to broadcast without needing to be discovered, to be part of a network. Just the way we can publish ourselves on these YouTube and all these platforms. I just feel like I was born at a really impactful time.
Well, and I think, for me, why I wrote the book, because I feel we are also at the time when we're more empowered to be able to launch different ideas. We don't have to wait for 20 years ago to get on an audio amplification of ideas. One has to have an own radio show, but everyone is now empowered to be able to launch and amplify their messages through their own podcasts.
Yeah, I love that thought because it's, I think it's always been true that there was always a first step that someone could take on the road to their dreams, but they were usually hidden, and we weren't taught that most of us could take that step, could go on that journey. Like when I was growing up, I didn't know any entrepreneurs. I didn't know any business owners. I knew teachers and people who worked for companies. And my father was a labor leader, and I knew clergy and people like that. Like I had no role models for this. Like launching is a path that's for you.
Yes.
And so
yes.
to have all these steps laid out, to have sort of entrepreneurship as part of the vernacular of our culture, and to have people like you sharing. One of the things I love about the book is that it's so small, and I mean that in a beautiful way. It's actually it could fit in my very large back pocket, and the chapters are small, and the steps that you're asking people to take or inviting people to take are pretty small.
Well, that was intentional, and so the book is the size of a Moleskine notebook, right? And there's even a little rubber band that ties around it like a notebook, and it's meant to be scribbled in and digested within the span of an airplane ride. And the intention behind that is we have to think about our readers. The reader is a hero of every single book, and so to empower that reader to be the hero, let's make the book as easy for them to digest as possible. And so we all have a lack of time today. So why don't we make the book concise and readable in the span of 1.5 hours? And I always feel like a huge sense of accomplishment after I read an article or a book. So let's give the reader that.
Well, I need to take a note for myself. I think my typical blog post would take people 1.5 hours to get through. So.
Well, and there's value in that as well. So.
Right. So there's two audiences I have in mind for our conversation.
Okay.
The first thing I thought of is I love taking ideas from the business world and then helping people apply them in other domains. So, especially around personal growth, personal development, people who want to change their health destinies, who want to, I love thinking about it instead of, okay, I'm going to eat better now, I'm going to start exercising, to think of it in terms of I'm going to launch myself into this new identity. Which has a lot more power to it than I'm just going to bolt on some habit because my doctor says I could, or I should, or because I can't fit into my genes.
That's right.
And the other audience, as I've been reading through the book and thinking about it, is people in my movement around health and nutrition and wellness who want to go pro.
Yes.
And don't quite know how to do it, and maybe think, well, who am I to do that? And so I think we could, maybe jump back and forth and kind of give some guidance and nuggets to both of those audiences.
So with the first audience, when you start talking about identity and launch connected to identity, I love that, because I think the stories we tell ourselves about who we are actually influence our actions and our behaviors and our habits, right? And so if we tell ourselves that we are no good at math, we naturally would shy away from math, and it's a downward spiral. But if we say, you know what, I can launch towards being better at numbers and I can grow, which is the growth mindset type of mentality, and have that as part of my identity, then certainly that will influence my behavior. And with that, I think the first aspect of any launch is to really think about knowing who you are and the story that you're going to tell yourself.
Okay, so one of the things I wrote down that was really impactful from the book is you talk about origin stories.
Yes.
And the way I thought of origin stories was the thing that made me who I am, right? Like Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider. And before that, he was just Peter Parker, right? But you point out, and I think this is so beautiful, that the origin story reveals who you are.
Yes.
Right? So you don't see the spider bite as Peter Parker's origin story, as Spider-Man.
No, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's not about the action, it's about the reveal, right? That helps people in that story. The reason we tell an origin story is to help connect others to who we are, help share what our identities are and our inner motivations and what drives us, our hopes and our dreams and our fears. And so in the Peter Parker Spider-Man case, yes, getting bit by a spider was when he became Spider-Man. But I think the origin story is around when his uncle got shot by a villain whom Peter decided not to stop because he said, that's not my responsibility. And as a result, his Uncle Ben died and got shot by that villain later on. I think that was what transformed his life. And you see throughout the entire Spider-Man lore this tension between understanding responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, and the desire to protect those whom he loves.
Right. And it's interesting in that particular story, because I think a lot of people can resonate with this, that it didn't show him a good part of himself. It wasn't like my origin story shows my mission, it shows my future. Like, we all want to like rub the crystal ball and understand, like, okay, this, like, help. Like, I know so many people, like, I don't know my destiny, I don't know my purpose, and we want it to be revealed to us. And instead, what gets revealed to us in our origin story is a wound.
It can be. It can be.
Or a weakness, or a gap.
Or vulnerability, as a good word. And I think vulnerability is actually a very good thing, right? Because vulnerability is connected to courage. So, for example, a few years ago, I was thinking about a entire movement for girls that's hooked around why do girls have to decide between being a princess and being a thinker, a problem solver. And how that origin story came about was, one day I was sitting with my young daughters, and one of them came to me and said, "Hey Mom, can you help me, take this thing down from the shelf?" And I said, "Well, you go figure it out yourself, because you need to build up that self-sufficiency." And she came back and she said, "I can't." I said, "Why not?" She said, "I don't have a prince with a sword." And I thought, oh, that's a problem. So why don't we look on Amazon? And this was a few years ago, and so it's more populated now, but back then it wasn't. So why don't we look for books about princesses who solve problems? And we couldn't find, we hardly could find any. And so we said, let's go ahead and create the Thinking Cap Princess series about princesses who solve problems. And we started doing that, And so now sharing that origin story connects you to, here's the why, here's the purpose, and here's the vulnerability that we were facing at that point, the problem that we were trying to solve, the challenge that we face, and this is our solution to it, and this is our approach to overcoming it. And so, I hadn't thought before about opening up a wound. But I think highlighting that every business, every launch starts with a change that that creates a opportunity or a problem. And actually, opportunities and problems are flip sides of the same coin, and can argue.
Yeah, and I'm playing in my mind with this idea, sort of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, or the more feminist equivalent, the Virgin's Promise. This idea where there's this activating incident that challenges you to become bigger.
Yes.
In the world. Like, I can imagine a lot of harried moms who would feel the pain of that.
Yes.
Oh, my daughter is speaking in a disempowered way, and here I am, this professional leadership development coach, business leader, and in my own home I've got this problem, but I'm too busy. I could feel that just sort of being sort of a lingering pain in your life.
Yes.
And instead you chose to
launch.
Choose
to launch, because it was a driver, right? The why was a worthwhile pursuit. Now, all of us, we probably in a given day might have 10 different launch ideas, and we're deciding not every idea should be launched, right? But the ones that enable us to pursue our best selves, that's connected to our purpose and our why, those are, when there's alignment between that purpose and us, those are the ideas that I think makes launch easier. Makes launching easier.
Right. Now, a lot of entrepreneurial stuff I've read takes this idea, like you discover the problem,
yes,
right? Or here's the opportunity.
Yes.
But it doesn't include, like the part of your story that I love is, so you're thinking about your daughter, but you're also, like, you could have just told her stories, right? You're also thinking about all the other moms and girls and brothers and fathers and dads who are going to suffer in a world in which girls grow up thinking that they need a prince with a sword. And so your launch wasn't just about, oh, here's a market need, right?
No.
It was, here's a human need.
Yes.
And I think that's missing from a lot of sort of entrepreneurship education. Is like, okay, well, here's a need. Let's make a business plan. I think we can capitalize it. I think I can see a return on investment that can work. As opposed to, like, I'm not sure how many people can carry that all the way through without the emotional fuel that you spoke of.
I think that emotional fuel is what grants us a sense of belief. And launching things, even after getting to launch, is hard. After launch, you're going to go through ups and downs, and unless you have that belief, it's not going to sustain you through those ups and downs, right? And I think that emotional belief is so critical. I recently spoke with Dave Brown, who's the co-founder of Techstars, and I asked him for his launch advice, and he said, basically paraphrasing, you have to be your own first customer. Right, you have to be your own first customer, and then you think about that is something you can connect with other people. Now, putting it into a story, I think, is important, because stories are information put into a context that is emotionally resonant, and so this idea of origin stories, I think, is an important part of any launch. And here's the thing: is most of the time, we're convincing people, we're trying to persuade people, whether you have a business and you are looking to acquire more customers, looking to acquire investor, or you are a young student looking to get a job in a new industry. What we're trying to persuade people of is to believe in our destiny stories, right? And if they believe, and the key to having a great destiny, to getting there, that belief in our destiny story, I think, is having that great origin story.
Well, I love that, because in terms of film writing, you're right, there's a way in which, the people who write about how to do film scripts, like Robert McKee or various other people who write about that, they talk about the ending has to be totally surprising but totally justified
Yes.
by the beginning. Like at the
Yes.
end you go, oh, it couldn't have happened any other way, even though I couldn't have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So the setup is what creates the payoff.
And it's also the character aspect, right? The nuances of that particular character and that ending that we are rooting for them. And I'm talking about happy movies.
Right.
So, the ending that we hope for them. Think about all the films when we are rooting for Han Solo, we're rooting for Luke Skywalker. It's because there's something compelling about their origin stories. And we see ourselves with a story. We can relate so much better. We can see ourselves in them. It's stories are what connects us. It's part of our humanity. We've been telling stories ever since the dawn of mankind.
So a lot of people come to me and they want to change their habits, and their stories are really disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Their story is, I've tried 20 times before. So of course they're hopeful, right? But the first time, they'll go, okay, I'm going to do all this, I'm going to do this, this, and this. The first time they give in and have a Krispy Kreme donut or a pepperoni pizza slice, the story, reemerges in their head and says, well, see, this is just like all the other times.
And I think that's part of what's at play there is behavioral science, the confirmation bias. If we have an existing belief or existing story that we're holding on to, unless we're aware, the next time we see something, we're going to most likely notice something that confirms that belief. Even if that something happens one out of 100 times, then notice the 99 times where it disconfirms our belief, right? So imagine that person, we don't have to imagine. I'll raise my hand on this one, Howard. I'll share my personal story. So I have not had the habit of working out. And all the other times where I've started, I haven't really kept up with it. Right? And so even if I kept up with it for 10 times, the one time I missed, I'm going to hold on to that one time. And it starts down a slippery slope, as you said. This time I'm doing something different. So one is the why I'm doing it. So before 10, 15 years ago, it was because everyone else is doing it and they say you have to work out. And two, it's for your health and staying fit and looking great. Somehow those weren't compelling enough reasons for me to keep going. Today, the reason I started is I think about my children and I want to be a good role model for them because I see the importance of fitness in their lives. And they won't want to engage in it, or they're less likely to engage in it unless they see other role models who engage in it. It's like that mom who tells their kid, why don't you read more? And then the kid the kid only sees the mom on the phone all the time, right? So I think it's about being a good role model for my children. And so I said, all right, I'm going to, and it's being fit and being around for them. So then I thought, I know if I do it alone, it's not, I would have less likely of a chance of succeeding. So I said, what if I got a personal trainer? Now for those who are listening in, it doesn't have to be a personal trainer. It can be a friend who does it with you, but it's an accountability partner. And for me, I just needed to also understand the right moves and form, right? And that's why I went the personal trainer route. And I said, instead of the old ambitious me would have said, I would go to the gym 5 days a week. And then of course I would miss one day and boom, that's the end of that. The new me say, all right, let me just start with 2 days a week and see how that, for 30 minutes. Now, those of you who are workout fanatics will find that laughable, like working out 2 days a week, 30 minutes, each time, that's hardly anything. But I think that's 2 times a week, 1 hour more than I would have done weeks ago, right? And so starting with that, and that has been manageable and enabling me to keep to it. And then perhaps I can add more to it, because then let success build on success, and we have to find the wins.
Yeah. So let me reflect back what I've heard in terms of what we're talking about a new story or an empowering story. So the elements of the new story I'm hearing are, so you have a different why.
Yes.
Right. You have a
more compelling
an
why.
altruistic why. Right. We'll all do more for other people than we'll do for ourselves.
Oh, that's insightful. Yes, I believe that.
Right. You also have. I'm imagining you're sharing this part with your kids as well, that these strategies, that you don't want your kids to be perfectionists to the point where they get paralyzed if they don't think they can get an A+.
Yes.
Right. So you're not only trying to be a role model in terms of the thing, but also in terms of how you approach the thing.
Yes.
And I hear you have this identity that's very well credentialed as a behavioral economist, and you're like, well, I know about commitment, and confirmation bias, and like I've got this bag of tricks that I've learned that I'm going to apply. I'm guessing like you discussed with your kids like social science things, right?
They're not at the age where we could talk at length, but I try to apply it in practice. And for example, when I'm teaching them piano, and at this age, they're 8 and 7 and 5, learning piano is, what you're learning is really how to practice, right? So it's not looking at the entire piece and being overwhelmed by it, but let's say, all right, let's take the first 2 measures. Okay, and then we just add another measure. And it's without judgment, right? It's without judgment. And it's saying, tomorrow, the next one will be a little bit better than right now. It doesn't have to be 90% better. It doesn't even have to be 10% better. It can be just a little bit better, but that's, say 1%. But 1% is better than where we are now.
Right, and I'm just imagining the disconnect in your kids to see you telling them that about practice and then doing the gym in terms of 5 days a week.
Oh yeah.
Right, like they'll sniff out that kind of hypocrisy. Like, oh, that doesn't work in the real world.
It's I think when we share why we're doing something, as I am with you and your listeners, this is actually creating even greater accountability for myself personally, right? So I think this idea of sharing our goals with other people, one, just by saying it, there's more commitment. There's more there's a greater sense of commitment, and research has shown that.
Right.
When we do something, when we write something in our own handwriting, we see it. Like, I am successful at going to the gym twice a week, and I hope to do so more. I write that down. I say it out loud, and guess what? That's now being imprinted in my mind, and that's there. That's part of the narrative now. So this idea of sharing it with others, that we don't do things alone, but we share with others, I think is important too.
Yeah, and I love how you have a real balance. It feels like a very sanguine and respectful balance between internal and external. Between like, okay, you talk in your book about vulnerability, about bravery, which is sort of like acting in spite of or in the face of. And you're also talking about, let's make the environment as conducive as possible.
Oh, yes, because research has shown, and this comes from our mutual friend, Dan Ariely. So I learned this from Dan. So Dan has said, if you want to go on a diet, and the trick isn't having chocolate chip cookies around you and resisting them, the trick is not having chocolate chip cookies around you, right? So the environment influences the choices that we make. I think about, as a parent, and both of us are parent, Howard, we talked about this. Well, when we think about it, as parents, we really don't have control over how our kids think, how the choices they make, and their behaviors. What we do have control over is the environment that we put them in, including ourselves and what we're role modeling, to help hopefully influence them towards making the type of choices we hope they would make. And so, I think about, all right, I can tell my kids till I'm blue in the face, we have to eat vegetables and fruits. And they come in and there's potato chips around. That's not going to work. But when I start putting more, they open the refrigerator and there's carrots and there's fruits, that's going to help them make those type of choices. And I think it's the same thing when we think about organizational leadership, is how leaders have to be cognizant over the environment that they're creating, which includes culture, which includes them being exemplars of what values they try to espouse, to influence in a positive way the behaviors and the choices that our team members make.
Yeah, just on that topic, like I was talking about this with a group of coach trainees this week about the dangers of getting to a position of leadership or influence or status and then losing the ability to see yourself. Right? There's all sorts of very frightening research about when people grow in stature and wealth, they become less empathetic, right? Like brain chemistry changes, like when you're more powerful. And so for a coach, it's easy to sort of overstep and sort of losing your curiosity, start thinking you know it all.
You hit on one of my favorite words, and I think a good habit for everyone, especially in their growth, is have a habit of being curious. Have it, because I think when we're curious, we start seeing things more and having a sense of wonder for the world. I think that's important. And when we're curious, we invite others in to share their perspectives. And that's how we can continue to have a pulse on a better perspective on things, right? Because I think unless you're intentional about it, it's very easy, the higher up you rise in the ranks, because of the demands on your time and attention, to become more siloed in terms of engagement, because you're just then looking. It's not for lack of intent. Well, it's not for lack of. It's not because they don't want to engage. It's just because the demands on your time, and then you're aware and intentional, saying, I need to invite and continue to invite those outside perspectives. It's going to be really hard, and you will wake up one day feeling you're very siloed and you're lost in your own head, and you've lost a sense of how one is perceived.
So I have a list of things that I wanted to ask you about from the book. One of my favorites is you talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, and the paradox of choice, and having too many choices. And I know a lot of people that I work with, once they sort of commit, they become overwhelmed. It's almost like the image we get is like they're spinning plates now. So now you are running a center at Duke. You are a mom of 3, and now you're going to add this other thing, and it's overwhelming.
Yes.
And the heuristic that you recommend, I thought is so charming and beautiful. You said, is this me?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, and it goes back to, so the launch book takes, so first of all, let me share a little bit about why I wrote the launch book. One, I wrote it for me, because every time that I'm going to launch something, because launches are change, and change is uncomfortable, I'm going to be gripped by anxiety over fear of failure. Sometimes there's also a fear of success, that I think others would have. And so to manage that fear, I thought that at least we can have a process. And then the second reason is I recognize other people have this problem too. So I wrote the launch book for my students, for friends, for my kids, and the broader readership out there. And so launching the launch book, the irony is that in launching the launch book, it was my first book, I was experiencing everything that I was writing about. And so there was a period when I procrastinated quite a bit, because I just need to find a compelling why, and it originally started off, I was thinking, oh, this would be a list book, a list of how do you launch, a list of tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's not me, writing in lists aren't really me, and I wasn't aware of that enough. That's why I wasn't moving forward on that idea.
Mm-hmm. So you had some sort of imaginary avatar of the person who was going to read this and what they wanted.
Yeah.
And what they wanted wasn't what you were meant to provide.
Well, I was thinking, actually, it was an imaginary avatar of a person and what they wanted. I was just thinking about what the book would be like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and actually my mistake was I wasn't thinking about the reader,
mm-hmm.
and I wasn't connecting with, is this me? Because I'm about stories.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I connected with a prospective reader, I asked one of my students, what would make you, when today there's so many demands on our time and attention, what would make you want to pick up a book? And Isabel's answer was stories. And the light bulb went off, and I said, stories? I love stories. I love telling stories. And yes, I've got stories. And then that's when the writing really started, because that was me. Mm-hmm. And so the first part of the book, the first process is asking, is this me? And the second part of the process is, you don't launch alone, engage others. So build a launch tribe. That includes mentors, co-creating with your customers, in my case, prospective readers, engaging naysayers and truth tellers. The third aspect is, can you imagine what's possible, right? And then the last step, which has generosity wrought into it, is this notion of we have to keep moving. It's next play.
Mm.
So is it me? Thank you for pointing that out, because that is the crux of the book. How do we overcome the perceived risks of a launch? Well, what is the risk if we launch in pursuit of becoming our best self, right? What is the risk when we are launching in pursuit of becoming ourselves? And so it has to start with, if that's a destiny story, it has to start with, is it me?
Right. Who is the character?
Who's the character?
And, I've always thought of confirmation bias as sort of a negative thing, but in listening to your story, like, there's some really positive confirmation bias. Like, not everyone would have wanted stories,
mm-hmm.
but you attracted a student who wants what you have, and you asked a particular student. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, someone who's much more analytical could have asked their student, and they'd say, well, I would want a 7-step process.
That's right.
Right, but you ended up intuitively asking the person who was going to give you the answer that was right for you.
I hadn't thought about it that way. I was just, I was thinking Isabel she's such a reader, and so what would make her want to pick up a book? And not directing the answer, but mm-hmm. I suspect there's a reason why she and I had connected, have this wonderful relationship, is because we do have that similar thinking, isn't it? Thank you for pointing that out, Howard. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah. And what I love about Is This Me is, say it's a heuristic, which means it makes 1,000 decisions easier.
Yes.
Especially for someone, so like, you're getting ready to go to the gym, and today's not really a great day. And yeah, you don't want to cancel on your trainer, but mm-hmm. you could. And there's plenty of other things, and dinner's not quite ready, and there's piano lessons and something. And how do you ask that question of yourself, is this me, in a way that helps you move forward?
Oh, you mean taking the choice to go to the gym?
Yeah, if it's 10 minutes before you have to leave.
Yes.
And you're like, you have competing demands.
Yeah.
So how does that heuristic? I'm trying to think of how the heuristic can help someone in the heat of the moment.
Right. So I think for that is creating a situation. I would answer it a little bit differently. Decided to launch into going to the gym mm-hmm. as a commitment because of the compelling why now, right? The why of my identity is as a mom. Uh-huh. So when it's framed as, is this going to help me be a better role model for my children? Is this going to help me be around for my children? It's with my children in focus. it made it easy. Yes, it is me. Going to the gym now is me, right? So there's a larger commitment now that in between times, we know there's going to be competing demands at certain times. So, but once we know that we're launching, I create sort of a sacred, that becomes sacred. That schedule, that time becomes sacred, and I work around that, right? So dinner, so in case of dinner, we might order out that night if I didn't get home enough to, or I might, my husband might cook instead. So I think this Is It Me is more about the larger commitment, and once you commit, the little parts, that goes into structure.
Yeah, I guess is this me can also refer to, well, I've got to go shopping today so that I can have this done.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like this, the magnet under the iron filings.
Yeah.
If this is the pattern that I aspire to,
yes,
then lots of little things, like it's not just that one moment. If I've set up my life so that I keep not being able to go to the gym,
right,
then it's not me.
Yeah. Right. Or then it's exploring, how can I desire to go to the gym, how can I reframe that purpose? How do I reframe that story?
Gotcha. Looking at my notes, I wanted to talk about the apology email because that was one of my favorite tactics, because it just hurts so much to think about it. Can you describe the purpose of that?
Yes. So there's this principle called loss aversion, and in loss aversion, it goes something like this: that we would be willing to exert energy towards avoiding a loss than we would towards having a gain, right? So if we know that that's part of human behavior, then how do we use that to motivate us to move forward? And so one tactic is, okay, I don't want, I'm too tired to go to the gym. Let's use that as an example. I'm too tired to go to the gym today. I'm not sure whether, and even though there's the gain there, that gain is not going to be, human nature is not as attractive to us. But if in the moment I can lean on loss aversion and say, okay, if I don't go to the gym, I have to write an apology email to someone that I've been, meaning, but I need to apologize to, or whatever it is that's more like a loss, then that's actually going to motivate me to go to the gym.
Oh, okay.
Avoiding that.
Oh, okay. Because I was reading it as like I have to apologize to someone for the consequences of my decision.
Oh, that actually works. We can, okay, so instead of apologize, like writing.
I was thinking like you'd write to your daughter and say, I'm sorry that.
Howard, I love that idea. Yeah, so this is okay, so for listeners out there, if you're reading the launch book, you're looking to read the launch book, in that one section on loss aversion and apology email, insert Howard's idea. Make an apology to the person whom you're accountable for in that. That's terrific. I was just thinking about any type of apology letter, right? But you're saying, oh, that's even better. It's now an accountability and a very specific, an apology letter to a specific someone.
Yeah, or even to your future self.
Oh, that's great. Right. I need to incorporate that. Thank you, Howard. See, that's the one thing about writing books or creating pieces or an art piece or anything is there's a nature of generative, right? There's a generative nature about it that I'm constantly getting great ideas back from readers, or they might have taken a different takeaway than I had anticipated. And that actually leads me to think about new things. So thank you, Howard.
Yeah, I live in fear as a writer of stealing an idea by accident. Because I come across so many ideas, and after a while, I start thinking it's mine. Like, oh, I think I came up with that one, and I'm it's like we're all in such an environment of sharing and creativity, and it's almost like the idea of intellectual property makes no sense.
Well, in some cases it does, but I think when it comes to art, And when it comes to authors like us, or authors like us are thinking about how do we get the message out, right? How do we get the message out? Because those messages can help others. So it's with that intent and with that outcome. And if other people are able to take that message and put their own spin on it, and it can help other people, okay, that's that's wonderful. Right. You know, you think about how generative Shakespeare's Romeo, we've probably seen a gazillion iterations of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Some of them are completely beyond the imagination of what Shakespeare himself would have intended. However, there's this lasting effect, right? There's this enduring impact. And let's face it, whatever good idea is out there, let's not be so arrogant as to think we're the only one with that idea. It's a world of very, very smart people. You look at the entire human population. I bet any good idea out there, there's 10 other people who have that same idea, but they're going to articulate and communicate that idea in a different way than we do, because they've had a different set of experiences.
Right. So let's piggyback off of that and talk to people who want to go pro, as you know, in the health world. So our listeners who have transformed their lives through the nutritional and movement and mindset guidelines that are in our community, and they're very grateful and they're passionate about this, and they would like to dip a toe in the water. And one of the things that I hear from people a lot, and it's partly because of my position, is like, you know, oh, well, you've got so much stuff, you've done these books, and you're like, what do I have to offer? And they feel like because they're comparing themselves to what's already out there, that it's saturated. It's almost like, you know, oh, we know everything there is to know, that everything is good has already been written, all the good podcasts have been claimed. How do you help, you know, and it's so clearly untrue. To me, it's like the visual is like a circle that keeps expanding, and the perimeter of the circle, you know, the new things are, there's always more new. The bigger the circle gets, the more newness there is. Like, how do you help people see their own unique contribution, even if it's not like Nobel Prize worthy, even if it's just their own take? I think
every person, through their experiences, through the lens, brings a different lens to the table, because no two person in the world have exactly the same set of experiences, right? And
do you want to get that? It sounds important.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'm actually in the middle of a podcast, Sam. Can I call you back? Hi. And and everyone has value, because everyone has a different set of unique combination of talents and gifts and experiences and stories. And so think about it as understanding what's a differentiator you have that you bring to the table. Now, one thing is, it's really hard for us to discover what our own differentiators are, or I would say what our own superpowers are, because the paradox is, when you have a superpower, it's because that thing that you know how to do super well comes easily to you. So think about Sherlock Holmes and his deductive reasoning. He kept saying, but this is elementary, why isn't anyone getting it? He probably didn't realize growing up it was a superpower. So we're terrible at understanding what our superpowers and our differentiators are. But we're really good at recognizing other people's. And so that's why we need to invite other perspectives to help us discover our own superpowers. Or as Mr. Rogers would put it, Fred Rogers, the famous children's educationalist, he would say, you know, part of our responsibility in life is to help others discover their gifts and their talents, right? And so this idea of recognizing your own differentiators, ask others, what is it that I bring to the table that you think will be different? And get some data around that. You may be surprised at what you hear and what you learn. So that one is, go out and get data. Again, this is connecting with other people, right? Getting their perspectives. And then the second thing is, so when I wrote this book, I start off with, I wrote it for me, right? And so you think at the end of the day, what does success look like, right? On the podcast, is it getting 1 million downloads? On the book, is it selling 1 million copies? I think those are not primary, but I think when you start thinking about, if at the end of the day, if this hits this, then it's a success in my mind, and start from there, and success builds on success. So did the launch book help me in the writing of it become a better person, be able to have a process to overcome my fears next time I'm launching? Yes. Has it helped 5 people think about launching differently and help them be braver? Yes, and I've got data for that. Okay. And it's not, and so when you start, so I would guess the second thing is setting up metrics for success, right? Your metrics for success. And success builds on success. And make those meaningful wins.
Mm-hmm. So how do you not lie to yourself? So here's what I'm thinking. So I have this metric for success. It's like, okay, I want 100,000 downloads per episode of my podcast. Now I'm somewhere between averaging 2 and 10,000.
Right.
And then it's not happening. So for whatever reason, and part of me says, well, honestly, Howard, you're not doing the marketing you need to do. You're not spending the time after each session to write it up. You're not doing things I know.
Yes.
And at the same time, I'm like, well, but if I reach 10 people, it's a success. How do I, on the one hand, it's true. It's all about sort of growth.
Yes.
So even if the thing is a total failure, but if I've grown from it and I've gained courage and I've gained resilience and I've gained self-knowledge, so that's a success. And I hear a little voice in my head that just wants to totally let me off the hook,
right,
and not go do the thing. So it's like this voice wants to encourage me to be lazy,
yes,
and it's using your voice to trick me into being compassionate with myself. Could also, it's like the podcast equivalent of sitting on a couch and polishing off a pint of Ben & Jerry's.
Well, one of the things is, that's a really great question. So now you've launched. I guess the next thing is about growth. You have to wait for my next book. No, that's a cop-out answer. I think most of what I was thinking about is just getting to that launch stage. We have to overcome so much self-doubt and fear usually, right? So I was just trying to help myself get to that launch stage, and then get to others get to that launch stage if they decide that the launch is worthwhile and they pursue it. But I think surely after that, say if you're a company, you do have to grow your revenue in order to sustain, otherwise you won't have a company anymore, right? You do have to grow your customer base. But I think it's, again, going to those little steps, right? So telling yourself, all right, did I learn from it? Is it, that's for 5 people. Can I hit those metrics? Now it's time to have newer metrics, right? So think about it as break it down. I guess this is part of breaking it down into smaller chunks. It's like it's an equivalent of course, eventually I want to work out 5 days a week, right? For it to be part of an ingrained part of my habit, so that when I don't work out, I actually miss it. But if I tell myself I'm going to work out 5 days a week, and that's a metric, and I don't think I would get started.
In a way, I'm sort of answering my own question based on what you write about around sort of generosity and kindness, which is I'm cool not getting to 100,000 downloads, but I'm not cool not getting to 100,000 downloads when there was something I could have done about it. Right? So kind of recognizing in my control.
Yes.
So I'm going to get some free coaching from you right now, if I might, under the guise of the podcast.
Okay.
So I've co-founded a startup.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm actually quite scared that we've bitten off more than we can chew, that we're trying to take on healthcare. We're trying to go to companies and say, we have a protocol and a technology and a medical management philosophy and platform that can get your employees to reverse some chronic diseases through behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many ways in which, when I say that, I'm thinking, like, people aren't ready for it. There's too many problems. It's too hard to reach people. The decision makers aren't actually the people that we're talking to. On Sunday, I'm going to Austin for 2 days to meet with a whole bunch, or an entire industry of people who are potentially our clients. And so I do have this, like, at the same time I'm gung-ho about it, I also have, this almost feels like a lead anchor of, like, I don't know that we can do this. And I'm being really honest, and this is, going out to the podcast, and I'm supposed to, I'm the sort of the marketing guy for the company, and I'm like running projects. I'm supposed to be like painting the destiny picture for, we need investment too. So
Right.
I wrote down, believe in our destiny story. So I'm trying to get people to believe in our destiny story,
Right.
and I'm sort of publicly saying, I don't know.
Okay, so one of the things, a key component we haven't really talked about in the process is co-creating with your customer, right? And engaging others. I mean, we've alluded to it, but it's really this idea of engaging others. So I know in a startup, it's sometimes we may lack clarity on what we should focus on, because entrepreneurs by nature are incredibly optimistic and incredibly opportunistic, right? And there's so many different directions in which you can take it, and being able to go forward on all those directions can actually be overwhelming. And so I think one is, to get clarity, you have to get data, get information. All right, so you don't know who are the right people to talk to. Well, by talking to different people, you're building up a pattern for understanding, honing. These are the characteristics of people, the type of people we need to be introduced to, and to be able to get their feedback. Okay, you don't have the answer. Don't be overwhelmed by that. You just don't have the answer now, but you have agency to go and get it tomorrow, right? So, and getting that answer from your fellow from people whom you're trying to serve. It's the same thing with when I was starting and writing the book. I was overwhelmed. I'm like, I have to come up with these many words by this deadline, and oh my gosh, I don't have a marketing plan together, and I still don't. It's been growing organically. Marketing plan together, I don't have this, and there's only so much time in a day. We have, and for you, it's like we have this number of people. They have only so much time in a day, and it's limited resources. It can be overwhelming. But just that idea of start co-creating, asking my students and prospective readers, what will make this of value to you? That brought clarity into, okay, here's where focus, at least in the content, should be, right? And moving, we can only tackle one thing at a time. Right.
And that's sort of the opposite of the startup world.
Yes.
Right. Like, the constraints of the startup world is like, I've got to wear 5 hats. There's always, as I'm here, I'm imagining all the texts that are going back and forth on my phone that I've turned off, all the emergencies. So it takes. I'm hearing that there's some degree of faith.
There is some degree of faith, and remember, it's not just you. You also have a team. And by the way, if you're not feeling overwhelmed, you're at that point where you figured it out, but that's only going to last for a second, and you're going to feel overwhelmed again, right? That's the nature of, if you're pushing forward, you're going to constantly work on figuring it out, right? You'll have clarity, but that's only for a moment, and that sustains you to a little while, and then there's lack of clarity again, and you go through that same process. It's a feedback loop, but you're not alone. You have a team. You have a team, and it's working with each other and maybe it's time you bring in an intern as an example, to help distribute the volume of decisions and tasks that you have to make, because maybe it might be at that point. So
I'll make a note to ask you after the interview if you have any good interns.
There is a network here, and so happy to put you in touch.
Cool. Yeah, I'm thinking also, back to your gym story, sort of the generative metaphor of this conversation is, I guess there's a point at which you go and you can lift the weights that you've been trying to lift.
Yes.
And at that point, you don't go, okay, great, I found the weights that I can lift, right? Then
right.
The next thing you do, your trainer
says, okay, I've got heavier weights for you. So yeah. Right. It's so I think one of the things is success breeds success. So you find your small wins and help you build a small win. So, okay, say you have 100 things on your to-do list today. Now, you and I know realistically it's not possible to go through 100 things on your to-do list unless you distribute those and delegate those out. So, say, do the 3 things. What are the top 3 things? And get in the discipline of that prioritization, right? What are the top 3 things that you need to get done today?
Right. And
that's doable, isn't it?
And that's my go to the gym moment, because when I see 100 things, what I want to do is the least important 3 things.
Yeah, but you have to identify what are the top 3 things that must be done today. And if they get done, then the next day it's the next top 3 things, right?
All right, and if I don't, I got to write some apology emails.
Yes, you do. I love that idea.
It's like, I've eaten the plums that were in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
All right, well, Sanyin, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful office on this gorgeous campus. It's so great to get out of the house.
Well, for listeners, my office is on wall, I think almost every wall surface, and is there's the greatest masterpieces in my world, and those are artwork by my children. And so it's very, very colorful in here. So thank you, Howard, for inviting me on your wonderful show. It's been an honor and a delight.
All right, well, thanks a lot.
I hope you're grinning as wide as I am, re-listening to that wonderful conversation with the generous and wise and grateful Sanyin Siang. If you enjoyed the episode and you'd like to support the mission of this podcast, the easiest, cheapest, quickest way to do it is to just go and leave a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever the heck they're calling it these days. If you need guidance on how to do that, just go to plantyourself.com/review for a quick little video that will show you exactly how to do it. Again, if you're interested in becoming a coach, if you'd like to help other people adopt healthy lifestyle and habits, and you'd like to find a plant-based community in which to do that, and you don't want to pay a ton of money, check out wellstartcoach.com. You'll find there not only a description of the program, but since we've already done a pilot run, you can hear experiences of some of the folks who went through that, and that will help you decide if it'd be a good fit for you. If you're looking for the show notes for this episode, it's at plantyourself.com/295. You can find links to the Thinking Cat Princess series, to the launch book, to Sanyin's professional page at Duke University at Fuqua School. Fuqua, got to say that correctly. Can't mess that word up. And if you're new to the Plant Yourself podcast, you can catch up on all the old episodes over at plantyourself.com. So in running news, I just got back from the World Championships of Old Men Throwing Plastic Discs, which is to say the Great Grandmasters Ultimate Disc Championships in Sarasota, Florida. My team came in 4th out of, I think, 11 or 12 or 13. And I accomplished 2 very important things. I was able to walk off the field after the last game on my own power, which means I didn't get injured. And I didn't make an absolute ass of myself either. I played pretty well most of the time, some mental lapses, but generally I would be happy for you to watch the tapes if there were any tapes. That finished up on Sunday. It's now Tuesday evening. My legs still feel really heavy, so I'm just taking this week as sort of a long, slow distance jogs and hopefully get back to some speed training over next weekend. In garden news, we have a potential new bed because we laid the foundation for my new office, and we actually had two different spots where we were going to put it, and one of those spots turned out to be the one where the foundation is, and the other is just a giant mess hole of mud that we're going to have to turn into a new garden bed. So that's all very exciting. Okay, thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use Sabali-Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as the theme music for this podcast. Check out willridenauer.com for more of his beautiful Kora music. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Got a new one, maybe two this week. Hard to keep track. Anyway, here we go. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Marrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Burns, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elizabeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Julianne Roland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Ramses Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gila Lacerte, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburk, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linnerman, which rhymes with cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzals, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Shell Rutledge, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rolls, Linda Ayat, Julie Langholm, Hedegaard, Isa Tuzin, Wakani Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Aviva L. Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Marani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, L. Kelly Baker, Miracle Ann, Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Deb Casilla, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Dee Ann Bishop, Billberry Elf, and Gunter Schmidt for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali-Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Marrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jean Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Barons, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrews, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lacerte, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carol Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburk, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva L, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harperson, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R, Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Isa Tuzawak, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Marani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, and Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan McCorney, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunn-Marie Hagan, Tracy Gullich, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, Diana, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorovska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, and Danielle Roberts for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for today. As always, be well, my friends.